What's going on, everybody? It's your host and MC, Bobby Dorless, but you can call me Bobby D. I got a real special one for you in our Voices series. And let me read some information about what we're coming up, right? It says, we are excited to bring you our Future Voices series with Edrizio de la Cruz, who authored Underdog Founder. That book right there, you better go get a copy. He is a Dominican immigrant raised in Harlem. Edrizio dropped out of college, joined the US Air Force, becoming an aircraft technician to make ends meet. He later returned to college, worked on Wall Street, and earned his MBA from Walton's School. And check this out. This happened a few years ago. In 2021, Arcus was sold to MasterCard in this largest Latin America acquisition ever. Now, the CodePath Voice Series bring together select partners and students for dynamic and real conversations around the diverse experiences that shape us and impact how we show up to work. We're excited to dive into the conversation and learn more about Ecclesio's journey and his advice to share with us. Now, I can't wait to see you there. If you're not already tuned in, tune in now. Holla at me. We'll see you later.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Voices series. As you heard from Bobby, we are super excited to get this kicked off. We have a great conversation coming your way, facilitated by our very own Vic, who is our Director of Corporate Partnerships here at CodePath, and a Miami native who will be engaging in a great conversation with Edrizio de la Cruz on his journey as an Underdog founder. We're really excited for this conversation. A few reminders. We encourage you to drop your thoughts in the chat. I see a lot of you introducing yourselves. Love that. There's going to be an opportunity for Q&A. You can drop those questions in the Q&A tab. We will also be sharing the link to our resume book during this session, and also encourage you to complete the session feedback at the end of the session. I am going to turn it over to Vic to get us kicked off. And thank you, everybody, so much for joining us. Vic, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Geneva. And how are all of my emerging engineers doing today? Awesome. Great. Love to see it. Today, I am thrilled to be on the stage with Edrizio de la Cruz. He is author of the international bestseller, The Underdog Founder, and a co-founder of Arcus, a fintech startup that was sold to MasterCard. Edrizio is what we call a CodePath champion, a supporter of our work, and he is also a former Y Combinator partner. And we're excited to hear all he has to share today. Hi, Edrizio. Welcome.
Okay, now I'm better. Hey,
Hi there.
how's everybody doing? Awesome. Can you hear me okay, Vic?
Yes, I hear you loud and clear.
Awesome.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Edrizio. Honored to be here with you today. I would love to really dive into a couple of different questions. I want to start at the beginning. So I know you have an incredible journey and background and story. So I'd love to start at the beginning of your journey, learn a little bit about how your family came to the US, and how did your early life experiences shape who you are today?
Well, thank you for that, Vic. So I grew up in Santo Domingo, in a neighborhood called Los Trinitarios, what I like to call the South Bronx of Santo Domingo. I was raised by my mom, my aunt, and my grandmother, while my dad lived in New York. And I was in a set of circumstances where, we didn't have always running electricity or water. So my mom was working 2 jobs to make ends meet, and I decided to help. And I just did what I could with what I have in front of me. And at that time, I had a plant, a guava tree in the back, guava tree. So I decided, and I looked at the supermarket, and they were like really expensive. And I decided to like sell it on the street for like a lot less than that. And that's how I started like making ends meet to help buy candles at night for my mom and dad.
Wow, that's incredible. And so you had these guavas in your backyard, right? And you started learning them. So you started selling them. And how did, what did you learn about entrepreneurship as you went through this journey in your barrio in Santo Domingo?
I think I learned start with what you have because what you have is already plenty. Like perfection is the enemy of progress. So you start what you have, and the best way to get started on anything, you start walking down a path, and you'll figure things out eventually along the way. But what you learn from just starting the journey, it's those lessons are gold because that will propel you forward onto the next step. So I had a need, and I just had to figure out how to fulfill that need, whatever shape or form I had possible. So I just took what I had in front of me, and I kind of productized it when I was 11.
Wow. 11 years old?
I was 11, yeah.
Wow, Adricio, I love that because I feel that sometimes, we think that to be an entrepreneur, you have to kind of start, go out and get so much and so much capital, but really you can start with just, what you have in that moment and start your journey there and see
Exactly.
where it'll take you.
Absolutely.
Awesome. That's a great token of advice. So, as a Dominican immigrant raised in Harlem,
Yes.
you have a unique perspective on the intersection of culture, identity, and entrepreneurship. How do you feel that your background influenced your approach to business and leadership?
Yeah. So when I was about to turn 12, I immigrated from Santo Domingo to go live with my dad, first in the South Bronx and then Harlem. And then, I was enamored with New York City as any kid would. I thought about New York City and the big city lights. My dad picked me up, drove me across the bridge. I was enamored. And then I woke up into South Bronx the next morning. So my dreams were shattered. This is like pre-Giuliani, South Bronx. So abandoned buildings, burned buildings. And I just that kind of dose of the reality kind of helped me grow up very quickly. It was kind of people talk about startup accelerators. Like
Mhm.
the South Bronx was a life accelerator. I grew up very quickly, exposed to a lot of things like gang violence, exposed to police brutality. I, one of my best friends was murdered at age 14. So I saw a lot very quickly that made me realize like life is hard and it's going to come at you very quickly. So you have to react very quickly. So what being in that environment, being in that ecosystem, allowed me to kind of understand that in order to do things and get out of your circumstances, you can be a victim or you can be a victor, right? You have to choose. Like life is, 10% what happens to you, 90% how you react to it. So shortly after that, I decided I just want to escape my circumstances. I wanted to go to college, go to the Air Force. I did that, but then I had to drop out again to help my parents make ends meet. So I wound up becoming an aircraft mechanic for the next 6 years because I just had to make ends meet. Again, I had to do what I had with what I had in front of me. So I think that having those kind of experiences very early on, age 16, 17, gave me just kind of an infinite sense of perspective and just character that ultimately really resonated with me and allowed me to kind of have the grit necessary to ultimately kind of grow a tech business to the size that we grew it.
Wow. Yeah, that is, I'm sure that resonates with a lot of our students here today, Alicio. And, thinking about you're either a victor or a victim, and it's up to you. I think that's, that says a lot about mindset, which I know we've talked about mindset before as well, and like how we have to decide to live our lives and do with that. So
Absolutely.
thank you. Thank you so much, Adricio. So now I want to dig in and poke into your experience as a founder. So I know a lot of our students today are, excited about Y Combinator and what that means for them as well. So I'd love to hear from you as a former Y Combinator visiting partner. What insights and experiences did you gain from your time there, and how did it shape your approach to entrepreneurship and startups?
Yeah, I'll talk about some surface level insights, and I'll talk about like what I think is probably the most important element of being a founder. So surface level, obviously, and I think you guys are ready. It's all about getting in the right room, and I talk about that in the book as well. Being in a room where you are probably not the smartest person, and that allows you to kind of learn from others. Being a CodePath, I think you guys already are in that room. You're learning a lot from probably the best platform for edtech in the world, I think. So congrats on that. But it's not static; it's dynamic. You got to keep evolving and keep continuing, keep learning, and keep soaking up that knowledge as a sponge. So one of the key elements that I think any accelerator looks for, any startup incubator looks for, is technical acumen. Like, how technically capable are you? That's one aspect. Another aspect is how close your kind of founder problem relationship, our founder market fit, so to speak. So how close to the problem are you? In my case, when we started the company, the problem we were solving was remittances, and it was near and dear to my heart because I grew up receiving remittances, and then when I was an immigrant, I grew up sending remittances back to my abuela. So when I stepped into that room uh, to be interviewed by people like Sam Altman and Paul Graham, I was able to speak with a lot of confidence, which is my next point. Having high degree of confidence, especially as a person of color, oftentimes we lack confidence in terms of saying that we can build a $1 billion business. One of the tricks that I speak about in the book is the way we can kind of hijack that lack of confidence is by just speaking about something that we have expertise on, right? And I already talked about how I could sell guava. I didn't know anything about anything else, but I could sell guavas. I grew up with guavas in my back tree, so I could talk about it and sell it on the street. And then that kind of evolved and morphed into remittances. And I used that knowledge, even though I wasn't confident about anything else, I used that knowledge to present with confidence. And that confidence was sufficient enough to ultimately get into Y Combinator and then raise a $30 million seed round from a number of high-profile investors. And the last aspect, I would say, ability to demonstrate that you've been in an environment of excellence, which is piggybacking on getting in the right room. I think a lot of investors look for that. Whether that's a school, whether that's a high-profile job that you landed through CodePath, you want to demonstrate that and highlight that again and again and again. As a person of color, I think it's very important to understand the game behind the game. It's one of the things I speak to a lot about the book, the fact that we are often not told exactly why we get the no. A lot of the reasons we don't get the no is because they view us as risk because we don't fit a particular profile. One of the things I started doing, mitigating, was like when I introduced myself, I would always talk about where I worked. When I was a founder. So instead of saying I'm Edricio, the co-founder of Arcus, I would say I'm Edricio, co-founder of Arcus. I went to Wharton. I worked at JP Morgan, right? It's a little bit cringy, but you get better at it and it becomes more organic. And the reason I think that's healthy of doing that because it lowers the barrier of risk for the VC.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And the piece around confidence and being a person of color, I can't wait to read your book and kind of, take some of that away with myself, and I know with others and students about, how much strength that can bring to the work that you do and how to, make sure that you are putting your best foot forward when you are chatting with folks. So
Of course.
that's a great piece. Thank you. So I know Arcus raised $20 million. I know that's no easy feat. So prominent investors like Y Combinator, City Ventures, SoftBank, Andreessen Horowitz. What were the key strategies that you used to attract such notable investors? And what advice would you give to aspiring entrepreneurs who are currently seeking funding?
Yeah. Well, I can leave that answer with first telling you what I did do that did not work.
Okay, perfect.
What I learned from that perspective.
Yeah.
So I recall in 2017, and this is one of the anecdotes in the book, so I won't give too much away. I went out to raise our Series A. I had first 10 meetings, okay, but nothing. Then 30 meetings, okay, but nothing. Then 50 meetings, okay, but nothing. 100 meetings, nothing. 144 meetings, nothing. 145 meetings, one yes. Then we got a Series A term sheet. Then what happened after that, I'll leave it to you to read in the book. But But what I've learned in that perspective, a couple of things. Number one, uh, is a numbers game, and and raising capital. It's a lot like, I'm going to use a sports analogy with
Please do.
not anybody else. Like, I'm Dominican, so I grew up on baseball. So it's a lot like baseball. You need lots of swings, lots of at bats, and a lot of that's just to get good at it, right? So expect to have 100 to 200 meetings. Come in with that expectations, and expect that the first 50 are just practice. I'm just gonna practice, right? And I didn't know that. What my approach then, which was wrong, was throw spaghetti on the wall and see what sticks. That's the wrong approach.
Mm.
You should be more mindful and tactful. And what I tell founders, and again, I go into detail in this in the book, is you should have like a 3-tier process where 40, 50 meetings are in tier 3 investors that you are not serious about, but you use them as a way to practice. And it needs to be practice in front of an actual investor, because in front of your friends is not going to be
Not the same. No.
not the same. Not the same. Once you get through those, your pitch should be good enough to go to tier 2, which is the bulk of your fundraising pitches. And if and only if you make progress with them, like you're in a partner meeting or you actually get a term sheet, then you go to your tier 1, which is your kind of your Santa Claus wish list, so to speak, like like the Andreessens, Sequoias of the world. Um, but treat it like that. Treat it like a process that you have to graduate into.
Wow, I love that. And I love thinking about it as you got to go into it knowing that it's going to take some bad swings,
Yeah.
but you will get there.
Yeah.
If you continue with persistence. Thank you. That's a great analogy, especially for our folks who are currently looking for funding. And so I can imagine you had, some really great swings, some bad swings. As a founder, tell me, Euricio, what were some of the most valuable lessons that you learned from both your successes and your failures while building Arcus? And I know there's going to be a lot of them in the book as well, but tell me, kind of what really like stuck with you that you'd like to share.
Wow, so many. In terms, one that's universal is, who you spend time with is who you become. Whether at the very inception when you're starting, or at the very peak when you're 100 plus employees, who you spend time with is who you become. Who you surround yourself with is who you become. The importance of the team you surround yourself with, the importance of your co-founders, the importance of your early employees. I cannot highlight how important that is. At the same time, I would say the opposite holds true for investors. It's not as important as you may think. There are instances where the people that are, the best investors, I say, are people that have done it before. And in the book, I talk a lot about my relationship with Gary Tan and Michael Siebel, who were kind of like very much my brothers in arms throughout my journey, and we became really close before I worked for them at YC. And the advice that I got from them helped me through the toughest times. So surrounding yourself with the right people and the right advisors, it can make all of the difference between failing, winning, and winning big.
Yeah.
So if you have to start alone, I think it's okay to be choosy, right?
Yeah.
And be highly selective. Many times, founders make the mistake of just picking and choosing the people who are closest to them as the best people. Always optimize for capability over closeness.
Yeah.
Because if the person's close to you but they're not the right person for the role, the friction that's going to happen, you might lose that relationship. It happened to me.
Yeah.
Right? Talk about that.
Yeah.
book. It's like it happened to me. So I have family friends I don't talk to. I mean, I'm the godfather of his son. I don't talk to him anymore because of the friction. But that was my mistake, right?
Yeah, and in as they say in Spanish, dime con quién andas y te diré quién eres. I couldn't let that one go without throwing that quote there on
Exactly. That's a good one.
Heritage Month. That one, my mom had instilled in my mind, and I'm to hear it and how it also works in businesses makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
Capability over closeness. Be really mindful of who you're bringing into your team, and that'll help you go even further.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great, Edricio. Thank you.
Of course.
And exactly what it means. You said to translate, Andrew, exactly what Edricio said, which is, tell me who you're with, and I'll tell you who you are. That's what it means in Spanish.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, let's move into your international bestseller. Last time I saw you in person, you had not published it yet. So congrats on
Thank you.
all of your success. I know that it was a long time coming. Also, Geneva dropped the link in the chat. If you all haven't gotten your book yet, please go ahead and do so. So your book is focused on highlighting the 7 principles for manifesting the life you've dreamed of.
Yes.
Could you elaborate on these principles and how they have guided your personal and professional development, Edricio?
Yeah, well, thank you for that, Vic. So I talk about principal goals because I didn't want to just have the reader take away just a memoir from the book. I wanted the reader to read it and have a practical set of tools that they can pull up in their back pocket and utilize them, not only to build the startup of the dreams, but really to build the life of the dreams, right?
Right.
And they're all centered around how do I get to where I am, to where I want to go, right? So the very first principle I talk about is, finding your field. A lot of people talk about finding their passion and driving their passion. I say that passion is not enough. I say that you need to find your fuel. And what is the difference between fuel and passion? Well, simply put, passion is what you like to do. Fuels are going to drive you to overcome the obstacles to do what you want to do. And the reason why your fuel is so important is because your team might change your journey, your idea might change, your market might change, your company may change, but your fuel will stay there. It is the only constant in your journey. For me personally, as I tell my story, but my fuel was really just, I had overcome so much so early. I felt like I had to do it. I felt like I had to win to give back to the community. And I think I've discovered that people are more driven by being part of something greater than themselves. And, that's why religion and politics are so popular, than that they are driven by money. So, I talk about many times in business that I wanted to give up and quit, but one of the things that just kept me going was like, I'm privileged to be where I am. And if I win and I win big, it'll take a look at the difference that can make for other people.
Passion is not enough.
No, it's not.
It's not. And that, I think that's, incredible to thinking about your passion and then your fuel and what is going to get you through the day-to-day and the grinds and the no's and the rejections. So eventually get those yeses in. Awesome. Thank you, Edricio. And what message do you hope people get from your book, The Underdog Founder?
I think that the underlying message is one that's embedded in the philosophical practice of Stoicism.
Mm-hmm.
And the message there is that, the obstacle is the way forward. A lot of things happened to me early on that, were tragic to an extent. But to me, I felt like if I become a victim of those things, then I let those circumstances beat me. What I think I decided to do, and I think I'm privileged because I received that blessing, was to allow me to use those circumstances to propel me forward. right? Allowed use that negativity and those obstacles instead of being a barrier to be a step that I could step onto.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I just used that energy a lot, time and time and time again. When people told me that I couldn't, you know, go from being an aircraft mechanic to be an investment banker, I used that energy to get me to the next step. When I got a really low grade in my GMAT and everybody told me that I couldn't go into a top business school, I used that energy, I used that anger, that frustration, and I channeled all that shit directly into my application, which would allow me to get into Wharton. And the same thing happened, when we got into Y Combinator, and same thing happened throughout my journey. It's just, we live in a culture that's very much an outrage culture. But I say, don't not be outraged, be angry. Just utilize that anger and channel it and focus it on the thing that's going to get you to where you want to be.
Arnab said it very well in the chat. That's what you call a top G, my friend. So that is incredible. And I love the concept of, hey, it's okay to be mad and frustrated and to funnel it into, what you want to do next and how you're going to make it into your next. You said I can't do it. Watch me.
Exactly.
So that is, I have chills just thinking about that, Edicio. So I can imagine, kind of like thinking about this concept, right? So can you share specific challenges that you faced as a Latino man in tech, and how did you overcome them? And what advice would you give to our attendees of similar backgrounds?
Yeah, I remember one time I was raising capital, and this is pre-diversity, right? I think there might have
Mhm.
been a point where I think I literally was the only person of color raising like a Series A. Like I didn't have a comp or anyone that I knew of, and I was running into these roadblocks, and I would get questions like, "Tell me about your team. Tell me about your background." And these were all coded languages for saying that I didn't fit the pattern,
Mm.
which I found extraordinarily frustrating because it's like fighting a ghost. Like you can't like grasp it, and you can't do anything about it if you don't know. It took me a while to figure that out.
Yeah.
And the whole pattern aspect I learned much later on. I was able to get educated on why VCs look at it that way. They're not in the business of risk taking, believe it or not. They're in the business of maximizing cash on cash returns, and I understand that. And what they look at is like, well, these have been the winners historically, and if all the winners look like this and they don't look like Edricio, why should we bet on Edricio? And that's the mindset. Unfortunate as that may be. So it took me a while to figure that out, and that's why in the book I talk about exactly how to overcome that and how to mitigate that in a way that maximizes your ability to succeed, and how to build a circle of champions around you, so you build enough social proof such that the person that's making the decision is able to kind of see you less as a risk and much more as an opportunity that they cannot miss.
So basically, you have to be undeniable.
You got to be unstoppable.
Unstoppable and undeniable. Wow. That is, yeah, that's great. And super interesting, the insights around, risk and how you can, how some of that comes into play. So I'm glad that you were able to crack the code, and I'm sure in your book you go in a lot deeper into what that looks like as well.
Yes.
Awesome. So I have a question from the chat that came in. So how do you balance taking business risks when you don't have a financial security net?
That's a great question. So yeah, I think one thing that doubles like the Black and brown community is like you often have, you're first in family to go to college. You're the first in family making income.
Yeah.
And you typically have, and if you're an immigrant like I was, you have responsibilities here and back home as well.
Yeah.
How do you balance those? Well, the good thing is it's changed a lot since I was a first-time founder. So it's very easy to get started and quite economically feasible to build a beta version of a product very cheaply. Like when I got started, it was hard to build a beta of anything, and the cloud was existent, but it wasn't quite cheap to put something on the cloud. Now you can do everything relatively cheap, thanks to the
Yeah.
advent of AI, no code tools. Uh, you know, our websites like Bubble lets you launch a quick iteration of an app and start charging and start kind of iterating on it very quickly. So the good news is that you can launch a beta version of a product very cheaply, very quickly, without
Mhm.
breaking the bank. I'm talking about hundreds of bucks, like very, very cheaply. Uh, Now, what you do need to do is have the right approach and the right mindset and the right strategy behind treating the MVP like an MVP, like an experiment, and not treating it like a business. And
Yeah.
I gotta talk about that in the book a lot. But one of the biggest mistakes that founders make is that they launch a product and they want to see revenue right away, and they feel bad when they're not making thousands of dollars in revenue, when in fact a product is really more like an experiment. And when you have an experiment, the result is not revenue. The result are lessons, analyses. I learned this, that, and my next experiment is going to be better. I iterate it, and that's what software is, right? It's a continuous set of iterations. You're launching again and again and again until you kind of hone it in, and I think that's the right way to think about it.
Yeah, that's a great point. And thank you for also like helping to debunk like you don't have to start, you don't have to have hundreds of thousands in the bank. You can start with a lot less. So that's great. Awesome. Thank you, Alicio. And a question from Jason. As an immigrant, how did you approach barriers as the underdog?
I think you have to reframe your mindset. I think the first thing I think about it, and I talk about how to shift your mindset away from a victim into a victor, and how to turn that in from a disadvantage in your mind to just an advantage, right? So if you're an immigrant, I think you have many advantages. You're multicultural, right? You're bilingual, so that expands the scope of potential target markets that you can attack. Um, so I say start with that mindset, because whatever you think you are, it's what you reflect to other people, right?
Yeah.
And so if you
Yeah.
think you are at a disadvantage, you'll act like you are at a disadvantage. And remember one thing: investors are looking for folks that are formidable, are folks that are attract and become mag- resource magnets, people that can attract more
Mhm.
resources. So if I invest in you, can you multiply my investment by 10x? Are you going to attract resources like other engineers, like press, like customers, like venture capitalists? And it's very hard to come off as somebody that's a resource magnet if you're thinking that you're not good enough. I am telling you, you are already good enough by virtue of being in this room, right? You
Right.
already have exceeded many barriers to get to this room. So start what you have with what you got, because what you got is plenty.
Yeah. Yeah, and that segues well into we've gotten several questions on imposter syndrome, Ericio, in the Q&A. So I'd love to double click into that. So here's one question. As a person of color, I've experienced imposter syndrome in my two tech internships. I'm curious, have you ever felt that before, Ericio? And have you experienced that as a person of color yourself in tech, and how have you dealt with it?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few times where I haven't felt that. That's more the question.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so I talk about so I am I've studied this at length. I actually dedicated a chapter to the book about that, and I called it "Getting into the Right Room." And so one of the things I've learned very early. Imagine, my perspective. Like, I have been an aircraft mechanic for 6 years, and I went
Yeah.
from that to investment banking. which is the most white shoe privileged segment within Wall Street, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I share some anecdotes, of how I experienced racism in a very kind of within the bank and with cops as well. Um, so all of those things made me feel I was exposed to more imposter syndrome from many more aspects than what I cared to have. But one of the things I've learned from imposter syndrome is it can actually be a good thing within certain instances. Let me elaborate. So when I was at JP Morgan, I was intimidated that I wasn't good enough. I was working with people that had gone to Columbia or Wharton or Harvard. So if you guys are probably in the same exact position where you are, Microsoft, Google, or some of these amazing companies with people that don't look like you and didn't go to schools that you went to. So you're probably feeling the same thing. And what I felt was like, wow, what a great opportunity. I get to be surrounded by smart people. Humans are social animals. And what I discovered is just by virtue of surrounding yourself with smart people that are different from you, have walked different paths, you are able to kind of grasp and attract and retain some of that knowledge that they have. So you spend enough time with them, guess what? You're gonna be at their level, right? You almost learn by osmosis, by virtue of surrounding yourself with those people, right? As a big mentioned earlier, like who you spend time with is who you become. So I started thinking about imposter syndrome as a litmus test for being in the right room, because the same thing happened to me when I was at YC as a founder,
Yeah.
and most recently as a partner. I was like, how the hell they let me in here? Like, I'm definitely not at that level, but it was like great, because I get to learn from them. I get to like pick their brains, and I get to understand how they do things, how they execute things. And those are tools in my toolbox that I get to pull up. I get to copy paste it, modify it, edit it, and it's now a tool that I put in my back pocket. And it's now part of like my DNA. Just because I got to go in that room and had the privilege of experiences imposter syndrome.
Oh, wow. So by being in the right, you have imposter syndrome when you're in the right room.
Yeah.
And how can you make imposter syndrome work for you? And what does that mean about your surroundings and what you can take from it? I am gonna write that on a post-it right after this conversation.
Yeah.
Awesome. I love that, Edricio. Thank you. And I hope you know folks here take that with them, because I know I will. Edricio, tell us what inspired the name of the book.
Oh, well, I think my entire life I've been an underdog. It's just
Yeah.
everything's been a fight. Everything's been a fight from the moment that I started selling guavas to when I was an immigrant kid in Harlem where I didn't speak any English, to working as an aircraft mechanic, trying to break into investment banking, to trying to break into Wharton. Everything's like nothing has come, not even easy, just like nothing's been like the steady path that most people travel. Everything's been a fight. And what I discovered is like, man, God put me on this earth for that. Put me on this earth to like to fight through circumstances, but also to share the story of how to do it and how to have the right mindset in order to help other people accomplish things that they thought that were nearly impossible. And what I discovered, in the 10 days that the book has been out, is that a lot of people feel like an underdog. They feel unseen. They feel marginalized, and they feel like this book has been a breath of fresh air because they've never seen anything like it. I mean, there's lots of books on being a minority. There's lots of books on starting a company. There's never been a book from this perspective that goes in depth at this degree of, I get very personal in the book. I share everything that happened and took place. For those of you that read it, you probably know what I'm talking about. And the reason I needed to share those things is because life happens and tragedy happens, and And it is how you react to those things that define your character, and your character is what becomes your destiny.
Yeah. Thank you, Mauricio. So, the students want to know about your early stage time at Arcus. How did you overcome the challenges that you encountered during that launch?
Yeah. So before it was Arcus, it was called Regali, focused predominantly on remittances. I think that the early challenges that we had, before we got into YC, is just that we just didn't know what we were doing. We
Yeah.
didn't have a guiding path, and more importantly, we didn't know what we needed to know. We didn't know what we didn't know. So when we got into the YC, which I talk about in the chapter, get in the right room, we immediately noticed that we were here when we needed to be here, and it was very intimidating at the beginning. Again, I felt imposter syndrome, but that was a healthy sign that we were in the right place. So
Mhm.
in our YC batch, we got to work with companies like, DoorDash was in our batch. And I just ordered DoorDash last night, which is so crazy to me.
Yeah.
They're a $55 billion company now. But by being exposed to that caliber of company at a very early on, I was able to see what the bar was, and I was able
Mm.
to have a true north. So just by putting yourself in the right room, surrounding yourself with the right people, that gives you a sense of like, okay, this is what I need to do. This is what I need to focus on. So let me go and just channel all my energy towards that. So I would say one of the things you guys should do as early stage founders is, you know, start meeting other founders who are slightly ahead of you. If you are, a pre-seed, talk to founders who raised seed in your sector. Founders are some of the most collaborative, helpful people that there are in the world, and it's secretly because we're all like masochists, and we want to help other people reduce their pain.
Oh,
Yeah, so reach out to them and build kind of a personal board of advisors, right?
mhm.
I have my
Yeah.
personal board of advisors when I was a founder, and these are other founders that are going to help you think about things. You can use them as a sounding board, and they can be a shoulder to cry on, which you will need to as well.
Yes. You're like, and you will cry,
Yeah.
and that's okay. Um, Mauricio, talking about crying, and kind of like mental health, and like, tell me a little bit. I had a small stint in entrepreneurship, but I think often about burnout and how to mitigate that, what to do. Tell me about how you take care of your mental health as you are grinding or for days and days on end.
Yeah, in the last chapter of the book, I highlight an anecdote that I talk about when I had some personal things that happened to my wife and I, unexpected,
Mm.
unfortunately, and that kind of was juxtaposed over the pandemic, where we had to like leave everything, go to her house in Santo Domingo, and at the time I was raising our Series B, but that took a back door basically, and at the same time had some issues with my co-founder, wound up parting ways with one of my co-founder. My other co-founder wanted to kick me out of the company, and I had gotten COVID, and I had just lost my grandmother. All that happened within 3 months.
Oh,
So all those things happening at the same time really just kind of pushed me off a cliff into kind of an abyss of like terror, anxiety, and just endless depression. Um, and and that's when I really didn't know how to have an answer. And that's where I came across a book called Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor. And one of the quotes that ultimately propelled me to write this book really stuck with me, which is the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way, right? And I
mm,
listened to that phrase and that quote, and I was like, wow, that's my whole life. Like my whole life is that quote. Like I've been living and breathing and acting on that quote my entire life. So why not keep doing it? Like this is like a video. Life is like a video game, right? It's
yeah.
like go to levels, and every level gets harder. But sometimes you've advanced so much that the level you're in seems insurmountable. but that just means that you've advanced a lot. And
Yeah.
if you can pass that, ooh, who knows what's next, right? So
Mhm.
I use that framework there to ultimately, raise our biggest round of capital from SoftBank, and ultimately, wound up selling the company to Mastercard, um, and ultimately, propel me to write this book, which is figure out the right frame of minds, figure out the right people that can help you get there, but don't try to do it alone, right? There are tools
Mhm.
out there,
Yeah.
And one of the reasons I wrote this book, because I wanted a less abstract version of a book that's been around for 1,000 years, and make it more practical for you.
Yeah.
So once you get there, you can have this tool in your back pocket to help you propel you forward.
Oh, thank you for sharing, Adricio, and thank you for the vulnerability. I know you've gone through some tough times, but it is refreshing to hear, folks being real about their experience.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate that. Um, so, as you know, it can be really difficult navigating the tech industry right now. Um, what advice do you give to our attendees who are facing a tough time in the tech industry, and how they should set themselves apart?
Tech is going through a challenging time now. First of all, I would say this is cyclical. It happens. It happened '08 to '09 in the financial industry. So
Yeah.
it goes through ebbs and flows, and this is just another ebb, and it will rise again. So the thing you can do right now is to be properly prepared for that opportunity when it comes, because it will come eventually. Um, the fact that you're in this very room tells me that you are already of the right frame of mind, and you are of the right skill set to do that. But don't stop there, right? Start thinking more proactively, right? Start thinking about surrounding yourself with the right people, as I mentioned, getting into the right room, and start building relationships with people who are at different increments of the career trajectory that you want to travel. People that are maybe 30 years out, people that are 10 years out, and people that are 1 year out. Build that kind of personal advisory board of folks that they might not even know that they're part of your personal advisory board. But I bet you that if you reach out to them and you have one call with them every 3 months, that in itself will be extraordinarily helpful, because it makes you accountable, it gives you a
Mhm.
sound board, and it gives you a role model, and a frame of mind that you can quickly start to copy, right? If you couple that with, you know, the right, reading materials, this one, and other types of reading materials, uh, I think that can really help you.
Yeah.
But you also have to do the opposite as well. The opposite of that means what you choose to do is as important of what you choose not to do. So
Mhm.
you have to read a lot of reading material that's out in the internet, that's written by people that have never built companies before, if that's what you're pursuing. Uh, Choosing to get advice only for people that accomplish certain things, right? Be very selective the advice that you take. Be
Yeah.
very, very selective, because a lot of people have a lot of opinions out there, but choose the folks that have actually done things in life, not those that are consulting about things, but the ones that have done things.
Yeah.
And I think that will give you a huge leg up in your career as you travel forward.
That's those are great tokens of advice, and the reminder that this is cyclical, and the opportunity will come, and being prepared for the moment once it arrives um, is great to think about. So I want to talk a little bit, Alicio, about the fintech industry, and I'd love to get your thoughts on the rapid evolution in the recent years of the fintech industry, and what trends and opportunities do you see in the fintech sector?
Yeah, it's been crazy. I mean, I remember I was in Mexico on Wednesday, and I talked to and somebody asked me the same question, and I told them, like, yeah, when we started in fintech, there was no fintech to be It was financial services.
Yeah.
And especially, there was no Latam tech period. We were actually the first company from Latam to go into Y Combinator, and it's now like a huge industry. Uh, so that was 10 years ago. And with regards to fintech, I still think we're only getting started. Um,
Mm,
and predominantly why? Because of the advent of AI.
yeah.
I think that's opened up a myriad of different opportunities that we've yet to really tackle. Opportunities, within the subsegments of fintech, whether that's cybersec, whether that's reg tech, insure tech, prop tech, you name it. Like there's so many opportunities around fintech, especially like the boring problems. Like Arcus, we fixed the boring problem, which was paying bills in Mexico, paying household bills, and just using software dramatically improved it, grew it to a $30 million revenue company, and sold it to MasterCard. And I think AI is going to enable or lower the barriers to fixing those boring problems in
Yeah.
fintech. Like, I don't know, getting rid of physical checks, like identity checks, like any of these boring problems that are still out there. And the great thing about fintech that I really like is the fact that any niche is a huge business. You could solve problem for, I don't know, for just billing for doctors, or uh, any other kind of niche segment you can fix, and that could be in itself a pretty big business. And thanks to the advent of AI, I think it's going to open up a lot of doors.
Very interesting. So we're just getting started. That's what I'm hearing, Mauricio. Wow,
Yes.
that is fascinating. Um, I'd love to hear. We'll do one more question from the audience here. So, what closing words of advice do you have for our attendees who are ambitious and driven, like you were, but may not have the resources or connections to feel like they know where to start?
Look, I think it's all about having the right frame of mind, surround yourself with the right people, and understanding that you know where you are is not where you're going to be. Where you are is a step in the direction you're going to be. But who you choose to surround yourself with, what you choose to learn, and what you choose to do will make all the difference. So, having the right frame of mind, having the right vision, the right circle of people will make all the difference in what you want to do. And again, like, I know things happen that are outside your control, but life is 10% what happens to you, 90% you react to it. So
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Um, Super helpful and super inspiring, Mauricio. And we've reached the end of our session. I'd like to, we'd like to thank you on behalf of CodePath, on behalf of the attendees, of myself, Mauricio de la Cruz, for the engaging discussion. Emerging engineers, can I see some appreciation in the chat for Mauricio? And if you can share one thing you will take away from this session. Seeing lots of inspiration, lots of thank yous. And if you haven't gotten Mauricio's book, make sure to go out and get it, because I know there is so many gems and great information. So really appreciate you supporting us and supporting our work. And now we'll go over to a brief video from our host, Bobby D. Thank you.
bye.
Ciao, ciao.